There is something quietly repetitive in the way your cat plays, and it is not in the action itself but in the selection behind it. A room can be filled with choices, different shapes, textures, and sounds, toys that were bought with intention and placed within easy access. However, your cat returns to the same one. Not always immediately, not in a way that requests attention, but consistently enough that it begins to stand out over time. And at some point, the question forms in a way that is not easy to ignore. Why that one? In this episode, we will explore why a cat's best toy is rarely a random decision, and how that preference begins to form through a combination of instinct, subtle experience, and internal patterns that are easy to overlook. Because what appears to be a simple habit often carries a structure beneath it, something shaped slowly through repetition, interaction, and a kind of quiet alignment between the cat and the object it continues to select. Choice that doesn't resemble a choice. From a human perspective, selection often feels conscious, something that involves comparison, assessment, and a clear moment of decision. But cats do not approach selection in the same way, and when a cat moves toward a toy, there is no visible hesitation that suggests a weighing of options. The movement appears immediate, almost automatic, as if the outcome had already been determined before the action itself starts. This creates the illusion that the choice is simple or even random, when in reality the process is simply happening beneath a level we can easily track. The echo of instinct. Long before toys existed, the behaviors they trigger were already present, embedded in patterns that did not require objects to exist in their current form. The quick movement of a feather, the unpredictable bounce of something small, the slight resistance of an item that can be caught but not fully controlled. These are not just features designed for entertainment. They are echoes of something older, fragments of instinct that do not need to be taught but only activated under the right conditions. And when a toy aligns closely with that internal structure, the response becomes stronger, more focused, and more consistent over time. Familiarity that builds quietly. At the same time, repetition adds another layer that is less visible but equally important, because the first interaction with a toy is rarely what defines its place. It may begin as a moment of curiosity, something incidental that happens without intention, but when that interaction repeats, something begins to take shape beneath the surface. Not a memory in the way humans would describe it, but a growing familiarity that makes the object feel predictable in how it behaves and responds. And for a cat, that kind of familiarity does not reduce interest, it stabilizes it, allowing engagement to deepen rather than fade. The illusion of variety. Many toys are designed to offer variety, with different sounds, textures, and forms of movement that appear to create a richer experience from a human point of view. But for a cat, too much variation can make it harder for a clear pattern to form, and when each object behaves in a completely different way, the interaction may remain shallow, never fully settling into something recognizable. Over time, one toy begins to stand apart, not necessarily because it is better in design, but because it is more consistent in how it responds, allowing the cat to engage with it in a way that feels more complete. What play means. This leads to a question that does not always have an immediate answer, but becomes more interesting the longer it is considered. When your cat repeatedly chooses the same toy, do you see it as a sign of preference, or something closer to limitation in the range of engagement available to them? Is your cat returning to that object because it offers something meaningful and structured, or because the other options never reached the same level of clarity in how they could be interacted with? And if that one familiar toy were removed, would your cat adapt easily, or would something about their behavior feel slightly disrupted in a way that is not immediately explained? It is one of those patterns that tends to reveal itself differently depending on how closely it is observed, and what feels obvious on the surface may begin to shift when you look at it over a longer period of time. You can share how this appears in your own cat, because sometimes the smallest repeated behaviors are the ones that carry the most interesting differences from one environment to another. Control within play. There is also a layer within play that is easy to overlook, and that is the role of control, not in the sense of dominance, but in the sense of predictability within interaction. When a toy behaves in a way the cat has come to understand, it creates a space where the outcome is not fixed, but still falls within a familiar range. This allows the cat to engage more fully, because there is less uncertainty about what will happen next, and more room to explore variations within a known pattern. Over time, this sense of control changes the quality of play itself, shifting it from something reactive into something more intentional, even if that intention is not consciously formed. The cat is no longer just responding to movement, but participating in a sequence that feels stable enough to return to again and again, which is why certain toys become central while others remain on the edges of attention. When a toy disappears, an interesting shift becomes visible when that preferred toy is suddenly no longer available, because the response is not always what you might expect. Some cats will search for it, moving through familiar spaces with a kind of quiet persistence, while others may appear to lose interest in play altogether, even when alternative toys are present in the same environment. This is often interpreted as boredom, a lack of stimulation, or a need for something new to replace what was lost. But the change may not be about the absence of stimulation at all, and instead reflect a disruption in a pattern that had already formed over time. The removed object was not just one option among many. It had become part of an internal structure that shaped how the cat approached play, and without it, the environment briefly loses a sense of clarity that had previously guided behavior. In that moment, the cat is not simply choosing not to play, but adjusting to the absence of something that had already been integrated into their expectations. And that adjustment can take time, not because the alternatives are inadequate, but because the pattern they supported has been interrupted in a way that is not immediately replaced. The quiet pattern beneath the habit. What all of this begins to point toward is something that does not stand out on its own, but becomes clearer when seen across multiple small moments. Your cat's favorite toy is not simply an object that happens to be preferred, but a point where several elements come together in a way that feels aligned. Instinct, familiarity, predictability, and a sense of control all meet in a single interaction, creating something that feels stable enough to return to without hesitation. Once that alignment is established, the behavior that follows appears simple, almost repetitive in a way that does not demand attention. A cat choosing the same toy again and again can look like a small habit, something routine that does not carry much meaning beyond preference. But beneath that repetition, there is a structure that has been built gradually, shaped through interactions that were too subtle to stand out at the time. And when you begin to notice that structure, the behavior itself starts to look different, not because it has changed, but because the pattern supporting it has become visible in a way it was not before. What seemed random begins to feel consistent, and what seemed simple begins to reveal a quiet depth that was always present. The weight of texture. There is also something about texture that often goes unnoticed, even though it quietly shapes how a cat interacts with a toy over time. Some materials create resistance, others collapse too easily, and some hold just enough tension to feel responsive without losing form. To a human, these differences are minor, almost invisible unless directly compared, but for a cat, they can define whether an interaction feels complete or unsatisfying. A toy that offers the right kind of feedback through touch begins to feel reliable in a way that is difficult to replace. The bite feels consistent, the grip behaves as expected, and the movement that follows aligns with what the cat anticipates. And when that alignment is present, the interaction becomes easier to return to, not because the cat is limited in choice, but because the experience itself has reached a level of clarity that other objects have not. Toy and cats. There is a tendency to look for complexity in behavior that stands out, while overlooking the patterns that appear too small to matter, and yet those smaller patterns are often the ones that shape the experience more consistently over time. Your cat does not need to make their preferences obvious for them to be meaningful, and the repetition of a single choice can carry more information than a wide range of scattered interactions. The next time your cat returns to the same toy, it may not be necessary to interpret the action immediately, but simply to notice it as part of something that has been forming over time, because the behavior you are seeing in that moment is not isolated. It is connected to a sequence of interactions that have quietly shaped how your cat engages with their environment. If this perspective gave you something new to consider, you can subscribe for more episodes like this. where we explore the quieter patterns behind everyday behavior. Because sometimes, what appears small at first glance is only the visible part of something that has been developing long before it was noticed.